And good evening, everyone, and welcome to Tigers Tonight. Again, for the second time this week, but a little different topic tonight, as of course, Memphis basketball practice kicked off today. And, I didn't even realize that when I was looking at the calendar to do the schedule breakdown. And it just kind of worked out that the IARP, as we just called it, ended yesterday. Basketball practice kicked off today, and we are 25 days away from the first exhibition game. Tonight, joined by my new co-host for basketball season. We'll start with our friend Isaac down here. Isaac, how are you, sir?
Man, I'm doing well. Glad to be back here on Tiger Sports Report, Tigers Tonight. Talking basketball, man, it's coming up quickly. It seems like it kind of snuck up on us, man, but it's right around the corner. Like you said, what, 20 some
20,
odd days?
25 days. Yeah.
Yeah, before the opener against, or exhibition opener against CBU over at FedEx Forum. Practice start today, as you said. So, man, it's fun times, man. You got football still going on, and it just, in the beginnings of that, I personally think on the football side, I think the team is going to be pretty good. I said 8 wins before the season started. I still feel good about that. We'll see what happens. But, man, I mean, you're going to have double duty here coming up soon, man, in Tiger basketball and the women's side as well. Excited what Katrina Merriweather is doing over there. So it's going to be a fun season over there at the Elmer Fieldhouse. So, man, make sure you get out there to those games as well, man. I'm excited about it all. I'm excited to talk about some basketball tonight.
Yeah, this is for some people, this is the best time of year. And now take a moment, of course, you've seen his work already, but to introduce kind of officially, Leon Taylor, the newest member of the Rivals team. Leon, how are you this evening, sir?
Man, doing great, man. I appreciate this opportunity. Just excited to start this season.
Yeah, and we were talking there off air, guys. This is not what's the joke? This is not your daddy's Memphis basketball schedule. As man, they are coming out hot straight out of the gate. I think it was Isaac just said this is an SEC heavy schedule with 5 teams, and Leon, Memphis starts the season on November 7th in earnest with a true road game in one of the weirdest environments in college basketball, and that's Memorial Gymnasium at Vanderbilt against Jerry Stackhouse and the Commodores.
Yes, sir. I think that's going to be a great game because you're talking about a young team with young talent, and these guys are trying to prove themselves in the ACC. And local battle. We got a former Memphis team Thad player, Malik Deal, who plays for Vanderbilt, who's 6'8", 6'9", who's going to want to pretty much do what he can do best against the Memphis guys because, it's a certain thing now with Memphis and Nashville players. It's like it's a battle of Tennessee right now.
Yeah, and Isaac, as Memphis starts at Vanderbilt, Leon brings up a great point. It always seems like those are the guys that gives Memphis trouble, right? The guys that because what people don't understand, we talk about this with football, it's like when you're a high-level basketball player, man, these dudes all have known each other since they were 12 years old. So,
Exactly.
Vanderbilt, you mentioned off the air that they're now without their Mr. Do Everything, Scottie Pippen Jr. They're picked by some to finish near the bottom of a stacked SEC. But I'm kind of in your ballpark. I think they're going to end up surprising this team that made it to the quarterfinals of the NIT last year.
Yeah, I think they'll finish higher than 12th. I'm a big believer in Jerry Stackhouse and what he's building out there in Nashville. And again, man, a team like Memphis, what's weird about this is you usually don't see a team like Memphis open up on a road, let alone 2 road games. And again, we talked about this before we jumped on here. I mean, these aren't gimmies either. These are 2 really good teams. We're going to talk about the second game here in a second. But going on a 2 road game, I mean, you got a lot of new faces with the Tigers, so they're going to be trying to figure some things out. So I think this is going to be a really interesting game. But I like it. I like them being challenged right out of the gate because, I mean, you look at this non-con schedule, by the time they get into the AAC play, they're going to be battle-tested. I mean, you got road games, neutral site games against really good teams. I mean, they're going to be ready to go. And like you said, right out of the gate, Jerry Stackhouse, man, making that trip up to Nashville. I actually like this game, man. I hope this is something that they could continue. I mean, you got 2 former NBA players in Penny Hardaway and Jerry Stackhouse kind of starting off this game. I was kind of wanting this game for a couple of years now, so I'm glad to see they got it done, man. I think this is going to be a nice challenge for the Tigers right out of the gate.
Yeah, and it's certainly a winnable game for Memphis and it will be a good road test, as our friend Jeb says. The worst major team arena he's ever watched a game in is Memorial Gymnasium. It's weird if
Yeah,
you've never
it's weird.
seen it.
It is.
The benches are on the side and everything. It's really bizarre. But anyway, and then moving on, the Tigers. We'll see how they stack up with the A10. And Leon, we'll kind of start with you. You know, two teams in the A10 that, depending on which outlook you look at, which none of the big ones are out yet, but they're either 1, 2, or 3, and that's St. Louis and VCU back to back for Memphis. To start off at St. Louis, who I think St. Louis is probably the best team in the A10. It's them, Dayton, and VCU. They're kind of 1A, 1B, and 1C. But, you go on the road to St. Louis to take on a Billikens team that, most Memphis fans are very familiar with, used to be conference mates back seems like forever ago in the old days. But, that's going to be two good tests again out the gate for Memphis.
Absolutely. St. Louis is an NCAA tournament team, and they just play smart, hard basketball. And that's what you want in the beginning of your schedule. You want to be battle tested for the NCAA tournament. And when you play a team like Vanderbilt and then you head against St. Louis, I mean, those are two great teams. I mean, St. Louis, like you said, they might be the leader of the pack in the A10. And then you got Vanderbilt, who's at the bottom, but it could easily surprise some teams. So it's going to be two great road tests.
And then, Isaac, you come home and you have VCU, and, VCU kind of rose to prominence a few years ago with Shaka Smart, but they're a team that they've kind of just been trucking along as a solid mid-major. And, to Leon's points with St. Louis, and I'm kind of guilty of this too. We tend to throw these exhibition games kind of out the window with CBU and folks like that. But you need a team like CBU to prepare you for somebody like St. Louis, and then VCU is going to get after you a little bit more and get you up and down the court. And I think Memphis is going to see three very distinct styles in the first 6 days.
Absolutely. Yeah, man. Yeah, I was going to say, going back to that St. Louis game, I still have nightmares of that game where they played them in the NCAA tournament that year. Rick Majerus, how Tigers they were clearly the better team, but they just couldn't play their game, man. They just wouldn't let them get out, get into transition. I mean, they slow you down, and they still kind of play that style. As you said, CBU is a kind of a similar kind of the way they run their offense is kind of similar to what St. Louis is. So you're definitely going to see a contrast in styles between Vanderbilt and St. Louis, and again CBU gets you kind of that mode. And VCU, like you said, is a team that picks up full court, high energy, really plays really well on the defensive end. So again, man, it's good that they get these tests early to learn how to play different styles. Because I mean, throughout the season, and you get into the NCAA tournament, you don't know who you're going to face or what type of team they're going to be. So playing these tough games against different styles early, I think is not only going to pay dividends for them down the line as they go on and possibly get to the NCAA tournament and try to make a run.
Yeah, I mean, that's that's the thing about your non-conference schedule. And in years past, it's kind of been the knock on Memphis, right? Is they almost took the Gonzaga path where they didn't play, they try to get up for one big game a year in the non-conference, and then blow through the conference. Then you get the NCAA tournament and you hadn't played anybody, and it ends up hurting you. After that, on Sunday, November 20th, then the Tigers will travel on Thanksgiving Day down to Orlando, where they are participating in the ESPN Events Invitational. And Thursday, they will play Seton Hall with Shaheen Holloway, who just came over from St. Peter's, where he took them to the Elite Eight last year. He's an alum. He's got some kids coming back. He's got talent coming back, got some transfers. But they'll have Seton Hall and then either Oklahoma or Nebraska, and then Florida State, Stanford, Ole Miss, Siena. It's kind of weird they could end up actually playing Ole Miss twice this year. Probably not. But, Isaac, if anything, you're looking to get a couple wins in Orlando and then get kind of almost a Q1 kind of step-up game in the final of that invitational and really kind of start building that resume.
Yeah, but you obviously got Seton Hall, as you said, in that first game on Thanksgiving Day. Shaheen Holloway coming over from St. Peter's. I think that's a tournament team. I think that's another resume building opportunity. They have a guard, Kaderi Richmond, who's really tough. He's a guy that you can watch out for on that Seton Hall team. And again, you probably get Oklahoma on that second day. I don't think Nebraska wins that game. Nebraska's not going to be very good this year, and I think you hope it's Oklahoma because that gives you another opportunity against a tournament team. And then on that third day, I think they skip a day. I think it's actually Thursday, Friday, Sunday. You could have an opportunity to play Florida State, and that's a tournament team for sure. So you could have an opportunity to get 3 wins against tournament teams here again, man, that's just a testament to this schedule. I just can't remember the last time we've seen a schedule this loaded. I mean, they're going to have resume opportunity after resume opportunity after resume opportunity this season. So there's not going to be one of these years. We've seen years where they just didn't have those opportunities. You lose, like you said, one or two of those games, and that's pretty much it. You didn't have a lot of opportunities in conference outside of maybe a Houston or something like that. So that's not going to be the case this year. I mean, they're going to have a lot of bites at the apple, man. And again, man, I hope they're able to take advantage. They have an experienced team, and I think that's one of the reasons why Penny was okay with stacking the schedule this year, because I think he felt like he was going to have a more experienced team instead of having a lot of freshmen and a lot of guys he's trying to work in. I think these guys, especially when you have a guard like Kendrick Davis, I think he's going to be able to bring these guys together a little bit quicker than what we've seen in the last few years.
You know, Leon, as then you round out November with North Alabama. So what are you kind of looking for, if not record rise? I mean, obviously that's fine too, but kind of what are you looking for that first month of the season? What will be how you kind of judge where the Tigers are as a team?
Chemistry. You know, chemistry is going to go a long way with these guys. You know, even though they're not a lot of freshmen on this team at all, you got a lot of veterans. You still got to get that chemistry together. And I think, as you mentioned, Kendrick Davis being that lead guard, and you also got Lomax, you got Keontae Kennedy. I mean, these guys have played big boy basketball before, and I think they're going to come together and rally. Even if it is a rough start, you get a chance to make progressions. And that's why, like, when that North Alabama comes along, you can kind of say, like, if we lose a couple games in that tournament, you can kind of bounce back with a game like North Alabama, which is a team that's kind of going to fight to make a name for themselves, but at the same time, it could be a bounce back win. And Seton Hall going back to that, I mean, Shaheen Holloway, we all saw the tournament. The guy, he has his team playing hard and tough, and it's going to be a great challenge for those guys. And if you do play Oklahoma, another good test, and hopefully we do play Florida State, that's a great win where we'll possibly be a top 10 team after a tournament like that.
Yeah, it's definitely, you know, and to me, it's not you know, if you drop a couple, it doesn't end the season, but it's a great opportunity to, as you said, Leon, just springboard yourself into the national conversation. Then the Tigers come home, as we said, for North Alabama, and then they get into SEC play where they play Ole Miss, I swear, and then they'll step out of conference and play Little Rock, and then it's 3 straight SEC games to close out the non-con. Well, they have Alabama State in there, but to really close out the meat of that non-conference schedule. And Leon, it's not just 3 bottom-feeding SEC teams. You've got Auburn, of course, a lot of stories there with Bruce Pearl. Alabama's not going to be pleased to say, or they're probably circling that game because we pretty much ended their season last year here at home. Good series with Texas A&M. So talk a little bit about that challenge of, you know, we're joking about getting 4 out of 5 SEC teams, but, you know, you don't get better playing weaker opponents. You get better by playing the best of the best, and we're playing some pretty darn good top-level SEC teams.
Absolutely. You get a chance to play Auburn. I mean, Bruce Pearl, we all know how he coaches. It's going to be a great matchup between him and Penny Hardaway, you know, the battle of the minds. But going back to the Alabama State game, you know, Tony Madlock, he's going to come in here and want to, you know, make a name for himself as well. You know, he got a lot of Memphis guys on that team. You got Madrake's Wade, assistant coach. Yeah, Tony Madlock's son, and a guy who's going to be on the Memphis roster, Amar Knox. He didn't get that scholarship, so he's going to have a chip on his shoulder. So I think these games that we got going ahead of us are going to be great challenges. And heading toward the Auburn, you know, once you get past those other mountains we got to climb, I think we're going to be ready for Bruce Pearl.
Yeah, and you talk about that's going to be one hell of a hill to climb, you know, coming out of Orlando, and then you've got to go see Auburn in Atlanta. Great game. It's going to be a great atmosphere down there. But Isaac, you know, you've got Auburn, Alabama, Texas A&M. You got Ole Miss in there, and you know, Ole Miss picked to finish, I think, 11th by most people. Vanderbilt right behind them. You know, Kermit's kids are going to play hard. I don't know that he's got enough kids this year, but you know, you're really testing yourself with the SEC too. And I know a lot of people don't like playing so many SEC games. I personally like it because it gives some interest to your non-conference schedule. You're not playing a bunch of guys that nobody cares about. And I really, for me, the kind of my test of that part of the season is going to be that Alabama game when we got to go to Tuscaloosa, because like I said, we
Payback.
kind of ended Nate Oates' run last year. We put him out to pasture a little bit earlier than most people thought, because we just absolutely destroyed them kind of very methodically at the Forum last year. So that's kind of the one for me of that little group. Though, is there another one maybe that stands out outside of the Auburn game?
Well, I think just kind of looking overall, I think Ole Miss. I think this is a big year for Kermit Davis. Because things aren't going great. I think they expected more when he got that job. It felt like things were really good earlier, but feels like things are kind of souring on him. So that's going to be interesting to see how that plays out. They're always going to play tough. Memphis, Ole Miss, kind of a rivalry game. So those games are usually really close. Every time those get together, they're really close games. You talk about Auburn. I like the fact that that's a neutral site game down in Atlanta at the State Farm Arena, where the Hawks play. That's going to be great atmosphere, as John said, and a good test. Because again, that's going to be kind of an NCAA tournament type atmosphere, being on neutral court. So I'm glad they have that opportunity. And Alabama's going to be a tough one. Like you said, man, I'm sure they're going to have payback on their mind, man. We had the whiteout at FedEx Forum, man. It was fired up, jumping in there, man. Like I said, jumped on them early, and they never really could get back in that game. So I'm sure Nate Oates and his squad has that one circled. So I'm sure they're going to be looking for payback. Not going to be an easy trip down to Tuscaloosa for the Tigers, but I think Texas A&M is the big one. I think Texas A&M has opportunity to win the SEC. I think they're going to be right there at the top with Kentucky. I think they'll be 1 and 2 in some order, and you get that game at home. That's what I like about that, and I think that's going to be your marquee home game outside of Houston. Of course, that's always going to be a big one in conference. But I think of the non-con games, I think that's the one I circle. That's going to be a big game there, because that's a real big opportunity, man, on your home floor. You get that one, like you said, man. That's definitely the type of win that can get you in the top 25, depending on what you've done out before then.
Yeah, I think that, if you're coming into that game with 1 or maybe even 2 losses and you pick that one off, I think you're top 15. You're really moving up. And then as I said, we close out the non-conference slate against Alabama State. It's going to take Tony a couple years to get that going down there. That's just it's a tough, man. These low major jobs are just tough. There's no words to describe, they're going to bus up here. They don't get to jump on a plane and come up here, or, and they just don't have the budget. And I'm sure Memphis is kind of playing them kind of to help Tony out, because for those who don't know, Tony's an alum of Memphis. He was around here. He was with Ole Miss. He was with Arkansas State. He's with Memphis for a while. He's
Penny's roommate. Was Penny's roommate in college.
Yeah. That's another sign we're getting old when, Penny's roommates are coaching against each other. We're going to step aside for just a minute. When we come back, we will take a look at the AAC conference slate and go through that. You're listening to Tigers Tonight, the basketball schedule breakdown. Looking to get away from it all? Hey, it's John here with Tropical Getaways Travel. And when I'm not following the Tigers, I help families and groups have their next amazing vacation. Maybe you're looking for a cruise, or maybe it's an all-inclusive resort that you've been dreaming of. Either way, I can help you plan a vacation that fits your budget and your lifestyle. When you're ready to start planning that vacation, give me a call at 901-667-8747. That's 901-667-8747. Or you can visit my website at tropicalgetaways.net. Let's start planning your next amazing vacation. And welcome back, everyone, to our basketball season schedule preview here tonight. John Maddox, Leon Taylor, Isaac Simpson with you on Tigers Tonight. And so the AAC play will open as the Tigers will start at home against South Florida. That's a program, Leon, I can't, there aren't many schools that I'm like, okay, it makes sense for them to not be great. How, if you are South Florida, besides being exceptionally geographically challenged, if you're Florida anything, how are you not good really at any sport? But that is just a program they just have never been able to get going down there.
Right. It's just not a real basketball school either. It's not real big on basketball, but football is a little different. But basketball it's never just got it going, like you mentioned. But I think it's going to be a good game with Tyler Harris over there, and Man, it's gonna be fireworks when he comes in the city, because man, he's gonna have a message to give out. Seriously,
My guy's never met a shot he didn't like. That's for
I
sure.
know, right?
And then Isaac, the Tigers have kind of a tricky New Year's Day test as they go down to New Orleans and take on a Ron Hunter Tulane team.
Yeah.
And Ron's he's just gotten a little better every year. He's just getting better and better.
Great coach.
He is a fantastic coach. He's one of those guys, I think that he just kind of gets the most out of his guys. That's kind of his thing. He doesn't have, I'm sure he would love to have 4-star and 5-star guys, but his passion, and he's just a guy that gets the most. And Isaac, that's a tricky thing going into a place like New Orleans on New Year's Day and then having to play a Sunday afternoon at 4 p.m. game.
Yeah, but before I talk about that, I'll go back to the South Florida game, man. I'm hoping they do something for Tyler, a kid who left here once. I don't think if it was up to him, I don't think he would have ever left. Came back, and I think you kind of say the same thing now, man. His heart is in Memphis. I don't think there's any doubt about that. But he's going to want to come and show out in that game, as Leon said. So I'm excited about that. Excited to see him back, man. Always been one of my favorite players, man. Going back to Cordova High School, what he could do, man, shooting that basketball, just amazing. What Tyler can do. So glad he's getting an opportunity to come back in here and play. And you talk about Tulane, man. Ron Hunter, just fantastic coach, like you said, gets the most out of his guys. Passes the eye test. If you want to see a guy coaching on the sideline, man, watch Ron Hunter, because he's all over the floor. He's working the refs, and I think his team kind of takes this lead with that. Always playing aggressive, and that's going to be a tough test. Definitely going down to New Orleans. I think they're going to be. That's probably outside of Houston and Memphis. I think they're going to be right there, probably the third best team in this conference. So that's definitely going to be a tough road game. So you got USF coming in here. That's a game that you should win again, but I think adding Tyler Harris, that gets another element to that game. But right out the gate, man, I think that's going to be a test to see where you are. That's a game that you really want to get, but I think it's going to be tough. I mean, they've had some problems going down to New Orleans the last couple of years, so even more this year. I think Ron Hunter really has that team on the rise, man. It's going to be interesting to see how long he stays down there, but that's going to be a tough game for sure on the road, and a good test, I think, early in the conference play.
Yeah, and it's one of those places, and for you young bucks here that don't remember, Fogelman used to not have air conditioning. Fogelman Arena, which is where Tulane plays. It's named after Avron Fogelman, who's a Memphis businessman, but a Tulane guy. Used to not have no air conditioning in New Orleans.
Yeah, that's
any time of year.
Not good.
It didn't matter. And just it was a dumpy little, it's not much better than that now, but at least they have air. But yeah, you'd go down there and they'd pack a couple, 3,000 folks in that thing, and they called it the hot box. That's what it was called, because you got in there and there's no air moving. And New Orleans is hot and sticky all year round anyway. It didn't matter if you went in December or in August. It felt the same in there. But just one of those places you didn't like to go play. Another one of those old places that we don't go anymore is Blacksburg, Virginia, to play Virginia Tech, but kind of a similar deal. But moving on, East Carolina then comes in. That's a team that, Isaac, East Carolina is one of these teams. They're going to be bad again this year. They're going to need somebody like Winston Tabbs, who comes over from Boston College, to step up. But man, they'll show flashes during the year, and then you look up and they're 3-14 in league play. And that was one of the games Jeb touched on earlier. Memphis, the fan base kind of lost Memphis. Josh Pastner lost the Memphis fan base with a St. Louis loss. I think that year that East Carolina beat Memphis twice, I think that was kind of the end. And Leon, that's just a game at home. You got to get. There's no excuse.
Got to get. Now, it definitely can be a tough road game. It's like Tulane and East Carolina, they're always tough road games. I don't know what it is, but it's like those guys are not motivated in the beginning, and then come second half, they have to fight their way and crawl their way back to a win.
Yeah, the good news is East Carolina is at home for this first one. I'm trying to look down the schedule. I don't think we travel over there. No, we thank goodness.
Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you why we struggle at East Carolina, because as our friend Jeb says, Greenville, North Carolina is a place you have to mean to go. It's a terrible road trip. You fly in, and I think you're still like an hour away by bus. It's an awful trip, and that little gym is tough and whatnot.
Fans are right on top of you.
Yeah, fans are right on top of you. Minji's Coliseum, that's the name of their place. So you have East Carolina at home, Isaac, and then you kind of have a double dip that I think you really need both of these too. You go to UCF and then you go to Temple. UCF is on a Wednesday and Temple on a Sunday.
Yeah, I think Temple's going to be solid. I think they're going to be somewhere in that top 4, 5, 6 range. So I mean that's always a tough game, especially on the road. I mean most of these road games, even when these teams aren't really good record wise, you go on the road. I mean these are some weird buildings that you go into with these teams and some weird trips, and it's just they always a lot of times Memphis just has trouble, especially at Temple. They've had trouble up there. I mean even in Memphis they've had trouble with Temple teams. So. That's going to be a tough trip, like you said, and UCF back to back. I mean, UCF. I mean, I think they'll finish. They're probably going to finish in the bottom half this year. They lost some talent. I don't think they'll be good as they were last year. So I mean, those are you definitely got to have a UCF one. I mean, you really need both of them. I mean, really, where this team is right now, you should be winning most of these conference games. I mean, outside of Houston and maybe even. I mean, that's pretty much it. Like really, with this Memphis team, with the veteran talent that they have on this team. I mean, the only team that they should really be worried about is Houston and Tulane, but you know that's not going to be the case, man. You get into conference games and weird things happen. We've seen it year in and year out. No matter how talented they are, these games are always close. But I think those are two on their back-to-back that you really, really need to get. You can't afford to drop those.
Absolutely.
And Leon, then you have kind of what I call kind of the package here. You've got you're at home for Wichita State. You've got to go to Cincinnati, which Cincinnati could be 1-26. And if you're game 27 and or 28 and you're Memphis, it's going to be a dogfight. At least, I say the thing about Cincinnati that I enjoy playing them is you know what you're going to get. Like it's going to be a fight. It's going to be
always.
56-51 type game. It's not going to be a 97-91 game. It's a fist fight. And then, SMU obviously without Kendrick Davis at home, but Leon, that's kind of an interesting dynamic of, is Kendrick going to want to show out against his former guys? The answer is yes. But then the other side of that is SMU, those guys, you've got Williamson and they've got a new coach, Rob Lanier. Those guys are going to say, well, you know what, Kendrick, look what you're missing out on.
Right, absolutely. And just going back to that Cincinnati, man, it's like Bob Huggins' legacy just stayed there and just will not leave, man, because no matter who coaches their team, they're going to always play tough and hard. And like you just said about Kendrick Davis and SMU, I think that's going to be a great matchup. The old coach versus the old player, man, it's going to be a great game. And, of course, he's going to want to show out for that game.
Isaac, Cincinnati, they're a team, they really had it going last year, until they lost 8 of 10 going down the stretch. But they went out and they got Jeremiah Davenport and Adams Woods. They picked up a couple guys, and Wes Miller, he's a guy that he's sitting there. If you look at a lot of the early prognostications, they've got Cincinnati 3rd or 4th. And most people think this is Memphis and Houston are 1 and kind of 1A and 1B. And then
kind of draw a line.
3rd is way down. I don't think Cincinnati is going to be that bad this year. I think they're going to, because they're going to play and they're going to play hard. And that game is kind of sandwiched. I always hate those road games that end up, and Memphis does this. We'll talk about here in a second, but they play home, road, home, road, home, road, home, home. So for basically 3 weeks, they're alternating. And you always hate those road games, especially when they come on Sunday.
Yeah, I was going to say that's weird.
It's a weird spot to be on the road on a Sunday at noon, which is another tough spot. So, that's just going to be one. It's going to be a fight. And then a trip out to Tulsa. I don't think we will ever see a repeat of what we saw a few years ago in Tulsa.
I hope not.
I think if that happens, Penny won't have to be fired. He just ain't going to get on the plane and come home. For those who don't know, what's that been? Was that 18 or 19? We lost by 40. I think it was 18.
18. I want to say 18. Yeah.
2018. Another road game and then a big home game. Now, because at this point, when you get into February, Isaac, now you're starting to think about seeding for the conference tournament. And, if you're not going to be 1, you definitely don't want to be 4. You'd rather be 2 or 3 because now you're trying to kind of position yourself because you want to avoid. And it's not that anybody's scared of Houston, right? Nobody's scared of them, but you kind of want to save that matchup until you have to play it.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah, because then if you're Memphis and you're sitting at 2 or 3, now you're going to be my cat. Sorry, you guys have never gotten to experience this before. Our longtime viewers
Oh,
are
you're
getting to
good,
see
man.
this firsthand. They're used to this. But now, Leon, you're starting to position yourself with scheduling and seeding, not only for the conference tournament, but you got to start looking ahead to the AAC tournament. And that February 4th game at home against Tulane, if Tulane does the things we think Tulane can do, that's a big home game for Memphis.
Absolutely.
So
I was
Isaac,
going to ask you that one.
Isaac, you're looking at that Tulane game kind of being mid to the end of the kind of the real meat of the conference schedule. And again, that's a seeding game where you're starting to kind of think about March and all that comes with that.
Yeah, I mean, especially depending on what happens with that first game. If you win that one, you really got an opportunity to kind of put your foot on the gas, man. If you go 2-0 against them, and then if you drop that first one early out of New Orleans, you're really up against it. You really got to get that one at that point. You definitely don't want to go 0-2 against them because, again, you're talking about seeding, and you don't know. You could be possibly looking at a tie there. You're talking about tiebreakers and things like that. So either way, that's going to be a big game. And again, I think once you get to February, like you said, you're starting to look at the AAC tournament and where you are, and that's going to be a big game. And again, hopefully you're looking to go 2-0 against them. Hopefully you get that one down in New Orleans. So yeah, man, that's going to be another important game on the home floor, and that's a Saturday game. So that's going to be a big one.
So then, Leon, you've got the Tulane game, and then you've got the classic, well, not really classic, but the kind of the letdown trap game because you go to South Florida before you come home for 2. And, you've got 3 in a row there. You've got South Florida, and then you've got Temple and UCF at home before the first trip to Houston. So that to me is another really important stretch for the Tigers, not to that our job, right, is to look out into the future and be prognosticating 2 weeks later. But Memphis can't afford to, go to South Florida and have a terrible game or come home and drop a game to Temple or UCF because you kind of want to set that Houston game up for what it's going to be. But that's an interesting stretch for Memphis with South Florida, Temple, and UCF, 2 at home.
Right. And that's why you play those tough games early to get ready for your conference. And I think when you're talking about playing Houston, I mean, that's a rival game for us now. And once you play the Auburns and the Vanderbilts of the world in St. Louis, we should be ready by that time. And I feel like personally that they should be no worse than the 8 seed going into the NCAA tournament.
So you've got that game against Houston, then you go on the road to Wichita State, and then 2 of the last 3 games are kind of I love what they've done with this Memphis-Houston game, putting it on the last Sunday of the season. It's kind of it's an 11 a.m. start here in Memphis at FedEx Forum this year. I love playing that game last, just like I love that the AAC tournament puts their final on Sunday. It's one of the last games before Selection Sunday, but I just, I'm a big rival guy, and Leon, you just mentioned that Houston's as closest to a rival as we've had because Cincinnati's frankly been down, but
Right.
Houston and Memphis are the class of this league, and I just Isaac, I feel like that everything you're doing prepares you for February the 19th and again March 5th, but you've got to get there, and you can't afford a slip up in Wichita, Kansas, or at SMU. You've got to kind of see through. And to me, that Houston game, that first one, in some ways, Isaac, kind of determines how the end of the season goes. If you go down there and you pick up a win, you build your confidence. But if you go down there and, let's say, worst case, you get beat by 15 or 20 points, what does that do to the psyche of the team? But then to Leon's point, that's why you're playing Auburn. That's why you're playing Vanderbilt. It's why you're at St. Louis. But that February 19th at Houston game, that's going to be critical, not only for seeding, but I think for the mindset of this Memphis team.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. And as you guys said, I mean, those early games in non-con is what gets you prepared for this type of stretch. I think one thing, big positive for Memphis is you get both of these teams, both of these games late when you should have your chemistry down, you'll be battle tested, and you don't have to play Houston early in the conference late. I think getting them late, you should be at your peak of your power, so to speak, by then. I think that plays out really well for Memphis. And I like the fact that they get them. The last one is at home. I like that. I think it was reversed last year. But I like the fact that last one on home, like you said, Sunday, 11 a.m. I mean, that's going to be a fantastic game. You're going to have a packed FedEx Forum. This is a rivalry, and again, man, you go down there, like you said, man, it depends how that first game goes down in Houston. Do you go down there and get a win? Is it a close loss? Do you get blown out? And that could kind of either give you momentum going into the next few games until you get to that last Houston game, or it can take momentum away. And again, you hope you don't drop any of those games that you're supposed to win before the end, because that kind of takes some of the flair and luster off of that if you do drop some of those games. So going down the stretch is going to be important. But I think one thing that we've seen from Penny Hardaway teams that they play their best basketball in late February into March. And I think that's going to be even more the case this year, because you have these veteran guys. I mean, guys that have been there. Leon talked about it earlier. You talked about Kendrick Davis, DeAndre Williams, Keontae Kennedy. These guys have played big time basketball before. And you've had a lot of young guys, and you've had them playing well late in the season. So imagine what these guys are going to be playing like once we get into February and March.
You know, that's, Leon, what I just would encourage Tiger fans to do is kind of hang in there, you know, a little bit at the beginning of the season, because there's going to be some bumps, because, you know, we joke that this is Penny Hardaway's best recruiting class since he's been at Memphis, and it's all transfers and experienced guys, but it does take some time to get those pieces kind of in place. So it's just kind of hang with the Tigers and be patient.
Absolutely. And John, what I really love about this team, you don't have any of those guys who are monitoring their stock as far as getting ready for the NBA draft. Because last year you had Imani Bates and Jalen Duran, and let's be honest, their mindset was NBA, and they're worried about their stock. They're worried about their numbers. This year you got veterans, and of course these guys have NBA aspirations, but they know what they got to handle first. They know they make their noise in the NCAA tournament, and so they're going to be trying to win, because for some of these guys, this is their last chance of making a name for themselves. So they're going to play hard. They're going to play tough. And like you said, there's going to be some games where we might be scratching our heads like, how did we let that go? But chemistry is tough. I mean, you can put all the talent on one team, but you still have to have chemistry.
Yeah.
We've seen that with the Lakers at one point. We've seen that with the Miami Heat their first season. It takes time.
Especially when you got a bunch of guys, like you said, that just they're not used to playing together, and they've come from all these different offenses and different mindsets. And, you know, now you're going to come in and defense is, you know, Isaac, defense is what Penny preaches. And John was the same way when he was here. You know, John said, you know, I have two goals. John Calipari's like, I want to make practice hard enough that the games are easy. And he said, number two, if you play defense and rebound, everything else is easy. Those are the hard things to do. And that's what's kind of going to be my kind of metric this year, is how hard are they playing and how hard are they working to play together.
Yeah, when I talk to people outside of the city and about Penny, they're always kind of surprised that he's not an offense first type of coach, that he's a defense first guy, but he definitely, everything with him starts on the defensive end. He says it all the time, and I think that's what's going to determine the ceiling of this team. It all starts on the defensive end and starts with rebounding, being tough, because, I mean, they got guys that can put the ball in the basket on this team. There's no question. I mean, you got a guy who, Kendrick Davis, can create, get a bucket anytime he wants, and I think, again, that's a big aspect that's been missing on this team. They really haven't had a guy that you say, just go out there and get me a bucket. And he has that guy now, and I think that's going to help them in some of these late, close games. But in the end of the day, man, defense wins championships, as they say. And it's how quickly this team can come together as far as chemistry. You have a lot of different guys. I think it's going to come together a lot quicker when you have a guy like Kendrick Davis and guys that have been there, done that. But it's still going to take some time. There's no doubt they're not going to be a finished product 2, 3, 4 games into the season. Still think it's going to take some time, because, again, it's a new roster. But, again, when I look at this roster overall, I just like that you have guys that have done it. I mean, you have guys that have been back in the system like DeAndre Williams. He's back. I really think Alo being back is big for this team as well.
Absolutely.
Having him off the bench, a guy that's Penny knows, Penny trusts in the requisite role, man, I think he's going to have a big year. I think that's really important for a backup point guard. I think him and Davis are probably one of the best tandems in college basketball. And that's not being a homer. I really do think it's really important for him to come back. Because he hadn't come back, you didn't have that veteran guy, backup point guard. I think that's something really important for this team. So the outlook, I have a pretty high outlook for this team, man. I feel pretty good about where they are. And again, man, I think it's going to start on the defensive end. If they can play some defense, I think they'll be able to put the ball in the basket, man. If they can get it going on the defensive end, man, I think it's going to be a really, really solid year for the Tigers. And I definitely think this is another tournament year for Penny.
I do too. And, last year as the president and at some points only member of the Alex Lomax fan club, I kind of got derided, but, this is a guy that, had a 3-to-1 assist to turnover ratio. He was asked to do things last year that he couldn't do.
Exactly.
And, I think with Kendrick Davis, a little better selection probably, but you get kind of the ALO with the Tyler Harris kind of in one package. Again, a little bit better shot selection. Shout out to Tyler, though, who'd shoot it from the parking lot if he had a chance. And, and in his defense, he made a bunch of them too. But, Isaac, you bring up another great point. You and Leon both talking about defense with this team. We saw it Saturday on the football field, right? Memphis's offense was lackluster, just couldn't get anything going, and the defense picked him up. And, Leon, there's going to be nights when you're 2 for 21 from the field, from three-point land going into late in the second half, and you're going to need to get a couple stops and a bucket, and that's where the defensive end pays off for you.
Absolutely. I'm so glad you passed the ball at this time because the whole time we've been talking, I've been thinking about KO. KO, one of the best shot blockers in the NCAA, is going to have a field day for Memphis. I think he's going to have a breakout season for Memphis. He's not a high offensive guy, but he's a great shot blocker who's going to alternate shots. And you still got DeAndre Williams. So our front court, I think, is going to take care of the business on the defensive end. And still, you have Alex Lomax. Alex isn't a great scorer, but he does things on the defensive end that's going to help out.
Like the team in steals.
Exactly. And I think there's going to be moments where you're going to have Davis and Lomax playing the backcourt together sometimes.
Yeah.
Because you got Davis, who's a great scorer, and why not let him be able to do what he does best? And let Lomax, who's a great floor general, just, feed the guy the ball. So I think it's going to be a great team defensively and offensively. And Keontae Kennedy, who's a 6'6" guy who can play the 2 and the 3, who's a great defensive player as well. I mean, he has so many different intangibles. I think fans are going to be really excited about this team.
Isaac, you weren't on with Leon and I before the game, and he called him KO. So now that's going to put the onus on you. You've got to pronounce his whole name for everybody.
KO Derichi Akabundu Ayogu.
Oh, you're showing
off.
You're showing off.
Man, I made sure early, man. I made sure I got that right, man, when he first came in. But speaking of him, man, just like Leon said, man, I think he's perfect for how Penny plays. I mean, he's not a guy that you have to run any plays for. I mean, he's just going to go out there, block shots, play defense, get rebounds, man, get tip back dunks, stuff like that. I think he's going to be a fan favorite. I think the fans are going to fall in love with what he does out there. I think he's going to be a big part of this. It's going to be interesting. That's a battle that I'm watching. It's going to be interesting to see what happens. Who's going to start there at the 5? Was it be Malco, who I'm excited about too? I'm hoping he can just have a year where he's healthy. I don't think we've ever seen him healthy at the University of Memphis. I mean, you go back to what he did at the East. He has a lot left in the tank that he hadn't showed since he's been with the Tigers, man. I'm hoping he can bounce back, but it's going to be interesting to see how that battle kind of plays out. That's one of the things I'm going to be watching throughout the practices and going into the season.
Well, Malco's a guy too that can get on the floor kind of in different sets. He can get out there, when it is a run and gun game, when KO's not just, that's not his thing, man. No offense, but he's not an up and down the court, 40 minutes of hell guy. But Malco can play. Because he can get up and down the court a little bit. I think the thing that KO is going to have to learn in this league, and Malcolm's had to learn it a little bit too, is they're going to have, because Duran was really good at it, they're going to have to stay on the floor. They can't, KO just strikes me as a guy, he's going to come out and bam, bam, 2 quick fouls, and he's got to go to the bench, and that creates problems. Real quick before we close out here, anything happened yesterday? I feel like I missed something that went down yesterday. Any news yesterday? So for those who've had been under a rock, of course, the IARP came out yesterday, and basically, boy, Isaac, you and I talked about it, and just we were both. I think we were probably equally stunned that there wasn't more to that, and I think, that Penny, they said they weren't worried, but come on, Isaac, you got to be worried with that kind of stuff. But now that they step back and they go, well, $5,000 fine and something else, and then a couple years probation, and Isaac, that's really the best case scenario for Memphis out of that. Yeah,
man. You were talking about it, as you said, early yesterday morning, in anticipation of the announcement, and we both thought they were going to get hammered. I think if you put a money line, I think that was probably plus 5,000 on the money line. The result that we got, like I don't think anybody thought that they would end up with just a slap on the wrist. But I think it's two parts of this. I think Memphis got extremely lucky with the timing of it. I think if you look at the landscape of college athletics with NIL and stuff like that, I think that really helped them in this case because now, looking back at it now, it's not really anything egregious, which I don't feel like it was anything that they should have got hammered for anyway, but that's just kind of the results that you expected. And I think also, we kind of talked about this as well, I don't really think they wanted any part of this. Because you look at a guy like Penny Hardaway, who way before he came a coach at the University of Memphis, I mean, the philanthropic work that he does in the city, just helping kids, just doing different things, charitable work. I mean, you can just take the ALO situation. I had ALO's dad, Alex Lomax Sr., on my podcast here with Tiger Sports Report a few years ago, and he just, man, got emotional talking about the time when he was locked up and how appreciative he was of Penny for kind of stepping in. I mean, ALO even lived with Penny for a while, and this relationship went back to, we're talking 5th or 6th grade, like before ALO was the ALO that we know today. I mean, Penny just does this. I mean, you talk about stepping in with his friend Desmond Merriweather and coaching those kids and the work that they did over at Binghamton. And when you look at overall, like what Penny has done with young athletes and other people in the cities, it's, I'm sure, stuff that we don't even know anything about. You ask the question, like, who's going after that guy? Yep. Like, why are you trying to bring that guy out? And I think that's what they stole to in the hearing and throughout this process. Penny made had a speech over at the Southern Heritage Classic luncheon, and I've been told that's basically the same story that he told at the hearing. And I think they're looking at this situation like, man, we're not going to try to bring that guy down. And I think that's kind of what we saw here. I think they saw a guy that really genuinely wants to help kids. And I mean, I just don't understand why you're trying to bring that guy down. And I think that's kind of helped them a lot in this situation.
I do too. And Leon, you know, the other part of me that kind of jumped as I thought about this last night, if you crush Memphis, which, you know, again, there's an old joke that says the NCAA is so mad at Kentucky, Cleveland State just got 2 more years probation. If you crush Memphis, what are you going to then have to do to LSU, who Will Wade is literally on tape saying, hey, we're going to pay this guy.
Strong ass offer.
Yeah, strong ass offer. And so, Leon, I think that probably played a part in it too of, you know, it's kind of a diminishing return at some point. If we give Memphis a 2-year postseason ban and take away 3 scholarships, we're going to have to shut LSU down.
Absolutely. I think just the landscape of college basketball saved us, like Isaac was mentioning with the NIL. And to me, I mean, let's go back in a time machine. Just think about when Penny was going through this process of playing James Wiseman. Everybody was like, "Oh, you're crazy. What are you doing? He doesn't know what he's doing. He's unprofessional. It's going to fall back on him." Now you come back to the present. Wow. This guy knew what he was doing after all.
I had my crow before we jumped on the podcast here tonight because I'll be up front. I was that guy. I was like, because the NCAA, and I think, Leon, I think, Isaac, you said it last night, they put out a tweet when we decided we were going to play him. The NCAA said, he's probably ineligible. Yeah. I wouldn't do that if I were you. Exactly. And we did it anyway. And I remember going, man, what is this dude doing? And you know, another Dr. Rudd, you know, he's another one that kind of thumbed his nose at the NCAA with this process. And, you know, for those who don't know, Memphis was not, what's the best way I can say this, forthcoming with the James Wiseman situation initially with the NCAA. And so that's really what launched this whole, like, if you go back and read the NOI, it was much deeper than an $11,500 payment to James Wiseman family.
It allowed them to set up shop at FedEx Forum. I mean, they opened themselves up for them to look at everything, not just the James Wiseman situation. So it was a big time risk, and usually these things don't pay off. But
not for Memphis.
Somehow, man, they came out for the W. Definitely not for Memphis. Somehow they came out for the W, man. I'm still kind of pinching myself today, thinking that that's the result we got, because that's not what I expected at all.
I told somebody today, I hope we got it in writing.
I was expecting Coach Haight to coach at least 10 games. I'm not going to lie.
Yeah, I thought for sure Penny would at least get suspended. Like I thought there was no chance. I thought that was at the minimum that Penny would receive a significant suspension. So it's crazy.
And looking back, Leon, do you not think that maybe, I mean, obviously, if you can hire Frank Haith, you hire Frank Haith. But do you not think maybe that's in the back of Penny's mind is I got to get a guy that I know can be a head coach because my tail is going to be sitting at home for 10
playing
years.
Chess.
Yeah, he's playing chess while the NCAA is playing checkers.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I think, like I said, we all was waiting for that. Because, I mean, we was all like, hey, what better person to lead the boat than Frank, you know? You trust JJ and Faraji, but that guy right there, I mean, that's a different kind of guy when you talking about X's and O's, man. That was
and that was always a knock on Josh, not to pick on Josh when he was here. We didn't have that guy. You didn't have an X's and O's guy or a guy who had kind of been through the ringer. Tried a couple different guys, neither one of them really worked. But you've got to have that guy. You've got to have a guy that's seen and done everything. And let's be real. Frank Haith has been in trouble with the NCAA before. He knows how that whole process works. He knows kind of how the game is played on and off the court. And that looking back now, somebody texted me and they're like, "Do you think that's why he hired Frank Haith?" And I'm like, well, I don't think that's the only reason. But I think, like you said, you can trust Faraji, you can trust JJ to an extent, but they've never been there. They've never done it like at a high level. And Frank Haith has. Like he was a guy that, while you would obviously like to have Penny on the sidelines, if you have to settle for Frank Haith for 5 or 6 or 7 games, you're going to come out of things okay.
Absolutely.
But slap on the wrist, a little bit of a fine, some probation, got to do some go to some conferences and watch a bunch of boring PowerPoints, but
yeah, but whoever that poor soul is, that's not gonna be a fun time.
God bless that intern. But no, it'll be, but again, and when you look back at the original notice of allegations, in a way, it included football, it included softball, it included obviously men's basketball, and I'm forgetting one, but there was another sport in there, and none of that, none of it was a big deal. I mean, I think the football violations were, I want to say they were level 2 violations or level 3, and they weren't a big deal. But, none of that came about, which tells me that the NCAA, Isaac, to your point, said, this is a dude who literally got into coaching because his best friend was dying of cancer. Like, that's the only reason Penny ever got into any kind of coaching was because Des was sick. And man, it's we can talk about his on court whatever, we've had that conversation. I'm sure we'll have it again. But man, that dude is a prince and is a king in this city. Like, I said this, and I don't mean anything negative towards Joe, but Penny Hardaway doesn't have to get King of Memphis tattooed on his chest. Like, that dude's the mayor, he's the king. Because he's such an important guy to the city, not just because look, he didn't want this. We're being real. He didn't want this job either.
No, he could be doing anything right now. I mean, he could be on a golf course somewhere, spending his money. I mean, he could be doing anything, and he's here to try to help that university and help these young men fulfill their dreams. Like he could be doing anything right now, man. That's what I respect about him most, and that's what lets you know that you hear this from all coaches. I'm here for the kids. I'm trying to do this, but with Penny, that's that fact right there. That lets you know that it's genuine with him. This is not one coach speak.
One last thing about that is that was kind of told to me when Alo left Wichita State, and there was no pushback, like from Greg Marshall. He was like, "Nope, go home, go play for Penny." That told me a lot because that told me, okay, yeah, that tells me that because other coaches know, pardon my French, the easiest guy to catch a bullshitter is a bullshitter, right? Like. These coaches all know that speak, but that told me a lot when Alo said, "I want to go home," and Greg Marshall's like, "Go home." I'm not going to not let you play. I mean, just go home, go play for Penny. So
I was going to say real quick one thing about the notice of allegations. No level 1 violations. It went down. It was 4 level 1s. I think it ended up with 4 level 2s and 5 level 3s. I want to say, and from my understanding, that kind of means that now you are on probation for 3 years, but if they do become guilty or sometime or get accused of another level 1 violation, you won't be viewed as a repeat offender.
Right.
I think that's a key aspect here as well. So that's crazy, man. Again, man, I'm still kind of shocked and pinching myself that this is what happened, especially when you're talking about Memphis. Like you always expect when it comes to Memphis, you think they're going to get hammered, but I think they got one back, man, maybe for 08. I think they were done a terrible wrong in 08, and I think we got one back here.
All right, so Leon, any final thoughts tonight? We're going to try to do this. I haven't got the schedule worked out yet, but we're going to try to obviously get back on here and chop it up again before the season gets started, before the preseason gets started. Any final thoughts from you?
Final thoughts. Fans, be prepared to enjoy great reports from me, Isaac, and John as we go forward this year. It's going to be great and exciting, and we're going to give you great content, and I'm just excited for this year. This team is going to be amazing. It's not just on paper. It's going to be on the court, and just give it time.
Isaac?
Yeah, man, and shout out to Leo, man. I'm really glad to have him here on the team, man. One of the hardest working men in the business, man. He's out there doing his thing, been doing it for a long time, man. So shout out to Leo, man. Definitely glad to have him aboard. But excited about this season, man. I think it's going to be a good one. Definitely, we're going to be pumping out coverage. So make sure you stay tuned in to TigerSportsReport.com because we're going to have you covered, man. We're talking men's basketball, women's basketball, all sports, football, of course. John, Larry, and Brian, man, got you covered on Tigers Tonight there. Hopefully they can finish out the season strong. And, I'm just looking forward to it all, man. It's just a fun time, man. So make sure you stay tuned in to TigerSportsReport.com.
So for Leon, Duncan the Cat back here, who made his cameos here tonight, this is John Maddox signing off. And we will talk to everybody next Tuesday night on Tigers Night, and just stay tuned to our Twitter feeds to see when we're going to continue basketball. Thanks for tuning in. We appreciate it.
All right.